In the heart of Africa, a little-known country clings to a great lake. Every week, a coaster steams from one end of it to the other, an extraordinary journey that unravels a country. This week, we're on board. Malawi is not what one would describe as a traditional tourist destination. It's not legendary safari country. Its game parks are few and far between. It's fair to say that both Malawi's landscape and its tale of humanity have more or less gone unnoticed in the West. If there's ever been a travel film about Malawi, we don't know of it. Today, that will change. Our old friend Nigel Farrell, who once showed us the perfect English village and then took us on a banana boat, has a very personal reason to unveil Malawi. This is On the Way to Monkey Bay on Travels.
Funding for Travels was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the financial support of viewers like you.
Just onto the D6. Our estimated time of arrival is still at 1:45. The weather in London.
Africa, a familiar word, yet for me a completely unfamiliar place. I'd never have dreamt of going were it not for a friend who'd lived and worked as a teacher in a country called Malawi for many years. You must go, he'd said. There's no other place quite like it. I'd known Tim since we were at school, so it was a real shock when a few months ago he died after becoming ill with meningitis. It was then that I made up my mind to discover what it was about Malawi that had so enchanted him. Go on an old lake steamer, he'd said. It's the only way to travel. There wasn't a lot of choice. The Intendere was the only steamer on the lake. I was lucky to get a cabin. That's a luxury on this ship. And since Malawians claim to be the friendliest people in the world...
This is the cabin? Sure. Thanks.
I was looking forward to meeting a few.
Hello?
Hello.
We sharing?
I think so.
Okay. You've got that bed, I'll take this one then.
He's not exactly the life and soul of the party. Perhaps I should try something a bit more formal?
Nigel Farrell.
Mike Nambote.
Mike and Bertie?
Nambote.
Nambote.
Yes. Mike Nambote.
Perhaps that was a bit too formal.
Looks okay? Bit noisy?
Yeah, seems the air conditioning system.
We might need that.
Ah well, things can only get better. Malawi is one of the smaller African nations, only hitting the headlines when it's in trouble, with drought, refugees or riots. Squashed between Tanzania, Mozambique and Zambia, Malawi has no access to the sea and is of little strategic importance. It used to be known as Nyasaland, a name given to it by its colonial rulers late in the 19th century. It didn't become independent from Britain until the 1960s, when it took on its new name Malawi. The country's dominated by a huge lake the length of England. I joined the Ntendere at Chilumba in the north, and ahead lay a journey through the heart of Africa which would take at least 3 days. And with the ship the only form of transport on the lake, it's not surprising it's packed to the brim with all kinds of people and goods. My slightly retiring cabin partner turned out to be a university lecturer visiting relations along the lake shore. Nice guy, as it turned out. We've passed dozens of these little villages, haven't we, with the thatched roofs and mud walls and so on. It looks very basic. I mean, there are no motorboats, I can't see any cars.
Their cars are the canoes, and the motorboats, these vessels that we are on.
The Ntendere.
Ntenderes. They're basically fishing villages, and this is a village down here.
Can you show me the village?
Oh, you're most welcome, though I'm not actually stopping there, but I wouldn't mind just showing you around.
I'd love
the
that.
sort of typical fishing village.
It hadn't crossed my mind that with most places not having harbours or jetties, the lifeboats are the only way of getting ashore. Mike had explained that the vast majority of Malawians have a subsistence lifestyle, much as they've had for hundreds of years, living in mud and thatched huts, eating what they grow or what they can fish. Up here in the north, there's no access to villages like this by road, and the people rely totally on the Ntendere's twice-weekly visit for all their supplies. For people, mail, and even newspapers, this is the only way to enter or leave the outside world. It's a lifeline. The ship's arrival is a big and joyful event. But Mike warned me that formality and protocol, as in much of Africa, has to be respected. Each village, however small, has its own chief, and nothing happens without his permission.
So this one...
Is this the chief?
Yeah, that's the chief, yes.
Right.
yes.
I remember you.
Can you just...
Go now, do your job.
Yeah, do you mind if I just show him around?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank
Please
you.
come.
All right.
No cars, no electricity, no telephones, no running water. Just fishermen quietly repairing their nets. Not everyone was down on the beach. At the other end of the village, I discovered what looked like a mini rock concert underway. Malawi is one of the very few countries in the world without television, so live entertainment is still the only form of entertainment, with music and instruments that are homemade. What I didn't realize to start with was that this was more than just entertainment. This turned out to be a song not about romance or happiness, but about AIDS, and more particularly, ways of avoiding it. Everyone's expected to do their bit. In a part of the world increasingly ravaged by the disease, this is one of the few ways of getting a message across. I didn't know education could be this much fun. It's on the shores of the lake, though, where the work is done, where the fish that keep them all alive are brought ashore by hand, just as it has been for centuries. And it was here, on the western side of the lake, that during the last century, the Arab slave traders came, hungry for catches of their own. I was surprised to learn from Mike that a slaver could take what he wanted, without even using force.
So he'd actually buy the slaves, he wouldn't just take them, he'd negotiate with the chiefs.
He would make negotiations with the chief. For instance, a person or a slave would be sold, say, for a piece of cloth or a small cup of salt or a piece of soap tablet, and then they'll be given to the slavers.
So from here they'd go all over the world?
Yeah, just end up out there.
I'd heard a story some of the men were castrated, is that right?
Oh, yes, I mean, a slave was not treated like a human being. It was like a piece of, or it was just like an animal, or a piece of stone or metal, anything that could easily be mutilated. That was the way slavers were being treated. When I meet a stranger, it makes me think, what does that particular stranger think about me? Does he think like what the Arabs thought, that perhaps we were cheap labor, sort of animals, some kind of tool to be used, not as humans. So at a certain psychological level, it does affect the modern Malawian in a sense.
So you're wary of being exploited, are you?
Exactly. We're aware of being exploited, and we like to be treated as equals and as human beings. Because it's a sad story for a small country like ours. We are already a small, tiny country, and the ill treatment really was unwarranted.
It's a bit more battered, this boat, than Back on board and steaming south, I met another passenger, Miss Hilda Evans, who's 72.
Yes.
Are you going all the way down to Monkey Bay?
Yes, but I'm especially going to the Cobra Island in Kota, where I used to work. I was there from 50 to nearly 58 as a missionary teacher.
How romantic. A young girl going out to darkest Africa?
I don't know about that, but I loved it out here. It's a beautiful country.
And this is the first time you've been back?
Yes, I haven't been back for 27 years.
Why have you come back now after all this time?
If I don't come now, I shall be too old to do it. My last chance, perhaps.
You don't mind travelling alone?
No, I love travelling alone.
We were still a day away from that island where Hilda had lived for so many years. So at the next stop, she suggested we go ashore together and explore something else. Hilda wanted to visit an old mission station high up in the hills above the lake known as Livingstonia. It was named after Dr. David Livingstone, the first European to discover this huge lake in the heart of Africa. Well, it sounded intriguing.
Hilda? How do we get up to Livingstonia?
We have to try and see if we can get a lift, I think.
What, hitching, you mean?
Well, I don't know.
Go on, lead on, lead on.
Comfortably sitting up front, Hilda seemed happy enough.
15, good. Getting up.
Some more 15 pence.
Yes.
What she hadn't told me was that Livingstonia is 1,200 feet up one of the most hair-raising roads in Africa.
You find a man at the back.
His name's Nigel, but I don't think he travels very much. Goodbye. Thank you so much.
When eventually we arrived, I began to wonder whether the ravages to my nerves and my buttocks had really been worthwhile. The place, which was apparently once the thriving hub of a large missionary community, now has a rather empty, desolate feel about it. While Hilda set off to explore, I decided to take a look inside the old church. No wonder the rest of the village had seemed deserted. Nearly the entire community, over 1,000 people, were here. Just a normal Sunday morning service. Dr. Livingstone fought against the slave trade after he'd arrived at the lake in the late 1800s. In his wake came hundreds of Scottish and English missionaries who threw themselves into the task of converting the native people to Christianity with a zeal that defied the appalling toll malaria and other diseases took on their numbers. After 2 disastrous attempts to set up stations on the lakeside, the missionaries discovered that the only escape from malaria was to get up into the hills. Under the leadership of Livingstone's successor, another Scottish doctor, Dr. Laws, that's where they went, away from the waters of the lake and the mosquitoes which bred by its shores. Such was the powerful influence of Livingstonia and other missions that even today the majority of Malawians are devout Christians. At the church, I met Mr. Chandra Weary, now in his 90s, who'd been the office boy for the man who started the mission in the 1920s. He thinks nothing of the 2.5-hour walk from the church to the small, sparsely furnished house where he lives surrounded by his books and his memories of Livingstonia's founder.
Daughter was brought the word of God. He wanted people to understand how God made this country, this world.
How did he do that?
Well, he came to gather people together, asking them to worship God. When he said, "Let us pray," people had to put their eyes on the faces, looking if he was an enemy.
They were frightened of
They
him.
were frightened because they used to see Ngoni people coming to kill them. So they said, perhaps he's the very same man who is bringing us to death. So they said, no, don't be afraid. I've brought you good news. We have to worship God. Now, look yourself. You are worshiping water, trees, hills.
That was what they used to worship before, the water,
That's right.
the hills. Was it difficult in those early days?
Oh, very much.
What were the
Being
problems?
a white man, they knew nothing about the white man. They didn't see any white man in the country.
And they thought the white man had come to cause destruction. And then he changed their minds.
He changed their mind, yes.
How long have you lived in this house for?
All my life here,
It's very peaceful, isn't it?
very much.
What's been the best part of your life here? What has given you the most satisfaction?
Christianity. I know Christ, you know. I know Jesus, I know God. Christianity.
Back on the lake shore, Hilda and I were learning an important lesson. It's much easier to get out of a boat on a shingled beach than it is to get back in. Frankly, I don't know how Hilda would have managed without me. I can imagine that this lake can get very choppy, can't it?
It can be very rough indeed. Yes,
Difficult to believe looking at.
Well, it looks beautifully calm now. I can remember once going to visit Chismulu Island, which I went to regularly, and we had a really bad storm. And first the sail went, there was a sailing boat, first the sail went, then the mast went, and I was being very seasick, so they tied me to the stump of the mast. and it took us 17 hours to get across between the two islands.
How far is it?
I think it's about 7 miles or something. We were just drifting in the storm.
So you were roped to the mast, the
Yes.
stump of the mast,
That's
Hilda.
it, yes.
Were you frightened?
Terrified, yes. And when I got to the other side and said to them, weren't you frightened? They said, no, not at all. If God wants us today, he'll have us.
Your faith failed you at that moment, did
I
it?
think it must have done, yes.
Because of its many stops at villages along the way, the Entendere has only travelled about 60 miles south on day one. Tomorrow we'll hit Hilda's Likoma Island, but before then, a tricky navigation into the harbour at one of the lake's main ports, Nkata Bay. Here, everything the island will need, from salt and beer to clothes and firewood, is loaded by hand. Amongst it all, a slightly flustered-looking European joins us, with what sounds to me like a French accent. Most of the night, the Entendere remains at Nkata Bay, and the coming and going never stops for a moment. Six o'clock next morning, and it's Hilda's big day, her return to Likoma Island after so many years.
Wonderful sight in this light, isn't it, Hilda?
Lovely.
Do they know to expect you?
Well, I think they should, because I did write a letter. Whether they got it, I don't know, but there should be some people there that I shall know.
You must have dreamed of this moment for, what, 30 years?
Well, I never thought I'd ever get back, so I don't think I've been dreaming of it.
You never thought you would?
No, I didn't think I'd ever get back here. I've often wanted to, but I didn't think I would.
It seems as if almost the entire population of Likoma Island has turned out to welcome Hilda.
How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Morning.
Welcome to Ireland.
Father John.
Yes. Father John now. Father John. I'm Philip Maso.
Oh, yes.
Maso, yes, Master Mhozi.
Nice. Oh, Sikomo.
After 30 years, Miss Hilda Evans is back, and the reception is beyond her wildest dreams. Like royalty, she's borne up the hill to the missionary school where she taught a generation of islanders in the 1950s. The main school hall turns out to be exactly as it was all those years ago.
A seat of honor. Isn't that lovely? Yes, it is. Same chair. Is that the same school bell?
Yes, it's still the same school, very late. Yes.
This morning is a great honor to see our guest of honor, Miss Evans. Please accept our small gift.
Oh, how very kind. Thank you very, very much.
Good morning.
Morning. Zikomo. Oh, I say, look at this. Beautiful bouquets.
Okay. Exactly.
Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, Zikomo kwambiri.
There are only a few hours on the island before she has to return to the Entendere. The ship won't be calling southbound again for another week, so Hilda slips away for a few moments on her own. This was the house where she'd lived as a young woman, and from where, caught by the missionary zeal characterized by Livingstone and Laws, she'd set out to shed a little light of her own on southern Africa. Leaving Hilda to her memories, I set off to explore more of the shoreline of what surely must be one of the most beautiful, isolated but impoverished places in the continent. I soon fell into conversation with a lady called Beatrice.
I'm waiting for the fishermen. I want to buy fish.
Are these the men here?
Those are the people. They are coming from fishing now.
They sound cheerful.
If they have got some, I'm going to buy them.
Are these the fish you wanted?
Yes, these are the fish I wanted to buy.
Is there enough there?
They are not enough.
Not enough? Enough for you to buy, maybe?
I wanted more.
What do you do with them? Sell them here?
No, I will go with them to Lilongwe.
On the Entendere?
In Tendere. I'm going to take Tendere here from Lukoma up to Chipoka, then to Chipoka to Lilongwe market.
And you sell them there?
I'm going to sell them there.
You get a good price for them? Do they look nice? Each year there are fewer and smaller catches of fish, but nobody seems to know why. Beatrice has to bargain hard if she's to make enough to feed and clothe her family. But less fish mean higher prices.
The fish are scarce nowadays. That's why you charge more money.
But Beatrice needs to buy some clothes for her children.
For children.
You can't help her there by reducing the price?
No, nowadays things are at the high price. That's why we are refusing lessening the price.
You drive a hard bargain.
Really, we are driving hard.
While those who can afford it relax in sunshine on the top decks, third-class passengers are confined to the heat, noise, and the rather strong smell of sweat and dried fish below. En route to sell her fish in the market, Beatrice has to keep every expense to a minimum.
And all requirements in the family.
How many children do you have?
I have got 7 children.
7 children?
Yes.
You don't look old enough to have 7 children.
I've got 7.
How old are they? How old's the oldest and how young is the youngest?
The youngest is now 9 years. The oldest is 30 years.
And do you have to provide for them?
I provide them when I sell fish.
Do you have a husband, Beatrice?
He doesn't help me actually. He has got another wife and he has got 6 children from her wife.
Does that make you unhappy?
I do, yes, I do become unhappy because I am not being able. The children trouble me. I want fish, I want to feed them, I want clothing them. All that worries me.
How much money do you think you might get for the fish?
I will get, if possible, 70 kwacha for this cattle.
You'd be happy with 70 kwacha?
After her 6-hour trip on the Entendere, it was a 4-hour bus drive to Lilongwe Market. Now, Beatrice has to sell her dried fish for 70 kwacha to make a profit of 12 kwacha. That's about £3 or $6.
Shall I help?
You can help me, yes.
So what's going to be your starting price? How much money for 6?
For 6, 1 kwacha.
1 kwacha for 6?
Yes.
Are you prepared to lower your price if you don't sell any?
No.
It's got to be 1 kwacha for 6. Okay. You look very confident, Beatrice. This is a slightly smaller one. Does that matter?
Take it off. You can put it.
Yeah? How much for the small ones?
We can put 7, 1 kwacha.
7 for 1 kwacha, okay.
They are very small.
Are they stopping buying because of me?
They wonder why you are found here.
Shall I stand to one side?
You can stand there.
I want you to sell your fish. I'll go.
I couldn't help but be struck by the fact that nothing here goes to waste. Everything is recycled, repackaged, or repaired. Meanwhile, Beatrice seems to be having some luck.
How much?
They've given me only 55 kwacha. They've rejected 70 kwacha.
55 kwacha. What do you think?
I didn't want this. I wanted 70 or 65 kwacha, but they have rejected.
Not enough?
No, they are not enough. It's not enough. If I want to buy sugar, only 2 barrels, which I'm going to buy.
Only 2 barrels of
and
sugar?
I want to buy clothing.
Can you buy clothes with that?
No.
Not enough for clothes?
No.
No clothes for her children this time. Only 2 large bundles of sugar to take home to Likoma on the Entendere.
So I've got to say goodbye now, and I feel bad about this. I feel a snake because you've got to carry all this. Can you manage?
The 40 kilos of sugar, which she balances on her head without a second thought, will be sold back on Likoma Island. And with the proceeds, Beatrice will buy more fish. And so the cycle continues.
Bye-bye, thank you.
I do hope she has a bit more luck next time. For the first time on this trip, I realized how tough life really is for most Malawians. Back on the Entendere, we continued south and into our second night afloat. On the morning of our third day, I got talking to the woman I'd seen embarking at Nkata Bay. Her name is Marie Dominique, and she is indeed French. What are you doing in Malawi? Are you on holiday or what?
No. My husband works in Malawi. So we are on a 3-year contract, right in the middle of the country, right in the middle of nowhere.
What does he do?
He's head of the Kamuzu Academy, which is rather elitist school where children from each district will be given equal opportunities in order to get the best education there is.
And you live there?
We live there.
You said it's in the middle of nowhere?
Well, it is in the middle of the bush. So it is very isolated, but you go through a very barren, bushy area and you arrive to somewhere which is really out of this world and very surprising.
En route to the Kamuzu Academy, my chance to learn about the reality of life inland. Although fertile, Malawi is one of Africa's poorest countries. It's dependent on massive foreign aid, which is at risk as long as this government refuses to move towards multi-party democracy. Today, I sense widespread discontent.
See now and then lots of maize plots.
Marie Dominique explained that away from the lake and its supplies of fish, the people are entirely dependent on what they can grow. If the rainy season fails, the crops fail. In Malawi, life and death are finely balanced. Have the rains been good this season?
We've had days and days and days when it was absolutely dry.
Are they going to have enough to eat this year?
I think it is a great worry.
Are we from the academy now?
We are about 3 miles from the academy.
What's it like?
Beautiful. Perfection. Absolutely beautiful.
Tell me.
Well, you will find it such a surprise because you have been going through bush and rather poor villages, underprivileged villages. In fact, it makes one rather humble and feel rather sorry for all these people. But Malawi is a land of contrasts, and therefore it has to be accepted.
Suddenly, after miles and miles of dirt track, a rare sight, a tarmac road. Next thing I knew, we were at the gates to what looked like a palace. So this was the legendary Kamuzu Academy, built by the country's leader since independence, Hastings Kamuzu Banda. Marie Dominique was right. This is an oasis, like a paradise, an unbelievable contrast in a land of such poverty. School lunch, and Marie Dominique, with her English husband, the headmaster, is now looking somewhat more formal.
Oremus, Benedictus benedicat, per Jesum Christum Domum nostrum. Amen.
The Academy reflects the President's obsession with all things British. Modelled on a British public school, all the teachers are from Britain, all the pupils study the traditional English school curriculum. Catherine is a third-year student. How difficult is it to get in here, Catherine? Not easy, I imagine.
Yeah, it's not very easy because there's so many students who have to take the exam, and they only take 3 out of all of them per district. They take 2 boys and a girl. So you have to write entrance exams, and to get through is really difficult.
So which district have you come from? Last year, 35,000 pupils applied for just 80 places at the Academy. The purpose? To create an administrative and intellectual elite. So you're the only girl from the Lilongwe district who can come here.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you feel when you heard the news you were coming?
Oh, I was very happy because it's something I knew I had achieved through hard work and everything, because I really wanted to come to this place.
What I wanted to know was why the Academy, named after its owner, the dictator and life president, Kamuzu Banda, was built here, miles from anywhere, in the first place. Next to the school, Catherine showed me one of the country's few national monuments, their equivalent to the Eiffel Tower or the Statue of Liberty. It's a small tree.
This is the national monument tree under which His Excellency the Life President Wazi Dr. H. Kamuzu Banda began learning. And because His Excellency attended his first class under the very same tree, we say that this is the foundation of our independence as well as the Academy, because that school was built to show the knowledge gained by His Excellency under the very same tree.
So, if this is where the President learnt his alphabet as a young boy all those years ago, this is where the Academy, designed in his image, had to be built. The longer I spent here, the more unreal it seemed.
Good morning. Would you like to go? And
can we stand and watch?
Yes, that is fine. Okay, boys and girls, sit down. Okay, on we go. I stomano minderon playing epautus melonta now.
The President decreed that all 400 pupils must study both Latin and Greek. Not perhaps a priority, I felt, in a third world country annually attempting to stave off the threat of starvation.
Quite. Do you remember the rule? When do you drop your sigma from the nominative to get the vocative? It's on your sheets.
Come on. Yeah, again. Yeah, good.
Tell me about the things that you're doing now in class. What do you think about doing Greek? Because some people might say it's not terribly relevant in today's world.
They'll say that, but it's a difficult subject, so you need to work hard and have a clear and disturbed mind in order to do your Greek properly.
So it's a discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And everything's taught in English, and you have to speak in English.
Yes. You have to speak in English all the time, except on Sundays. If you're found speaking Chichewa, then you're put in detention.
You're punished?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds very strict.
Mm-hmm.
Despite its obvious merits, I couldn't help but feel uneasy about this monument to one man's obsession. And I was rather looking forward to heading back to the good old Entendere. It was beginning to feel like home. Sadly, my journey is nearing its end. After 300 miles on the most beautiful lake I'd ever seen, the Entendere is steaming down to its most southerly point, its home port of Monkey Bay. I found myself turning again to my own school days and Tim, the reason I was here in the first place. My friend was never to achieve his ambition of returning to the lake to live out the rest of his days. Now I was beginning to understand its hold over him. It's unspoilt, unpolluted, undisturbed. What next then, Hilda?
Well, we're just coming down to Monkey Bay, and then I'm hoping to go to the fisheries department and see them.
What are you going to do there?
Well, I'm hoping to see a special fish, because when we were on Lacoma Island, the fisheries research people came up there, and very excitedly they found a new species of fish they hadn't seen, because there are thousands of species in the lake, hundreds perhaps I should say, and they came up and they found this new one, and they named the fish after the people on the island. We each had one named after us, 3 different species they found.
So you've actually had a fish named after you?
Yes.
What is it?
Well, it's quite a small fish, but we saw it when we were on the island, but I haven't seen it since, and I'm hoping we might find a record of it down at Monkey Bay.
What's it called?
It was called Licomensis evansi, after Lacoma Island and Evans. So
A fish in honour of Miss Evans?
Yes.
A fish called Hilda?
That's it.
Monkey Bay, and the end of my extraordinary introduction to Africa. I'm sure I'll miss the rusty old Entendere, but she certainly won't miss me. Within just a few hours, she'll be refueled and restocked and heading back up north to all those lakeside towns and villages that rely so much upon her. Hilda Evans, though, has one final task.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Hilda Evans.
Hi, Dennis Twiddle.
Yes. Sorry to bother you, because I'm sure you're very busy. I've come to inquire about a fish. You'll show me where to look.
Hilda's about to discover that life below the water of Lake Malawi is as colourful and varied as life above it.
If you want to have a look there, I'll be back in a few
Thank you very
minutes.
much. I'll go and start at the end here then. Thank you.
Her fish, if it exists, is just one of about 1,000 unique species that have been discovered in the lake. Many came to light in the 50s when Hilda was first here, and such is the backlog that they're stored at the fisheries department, still waiting to be logged and classified. Tracking down Licomensis evansi looks like taking a little while. Even after several hours, nothing with even a hint of Evans in it. Ah. How'd you get on? Any luck?
No, no. I didn't actually see any fish named after me or anything, but they had all sorts of fishes in large jars, small jars, marmite jars.
Marmite jars?
Marmite jars and tomato sauce jars. They've got hundreds of specimens in there.
So was this chap pulling your leg, or did he mean it, do you think?
Oh, no, there were definitely fish there that he was... But possibly he changed his mind when he got down south, I don't know.
So maybe it's got lost in the fullness of time, the records of it.
That's it.
Still, you've had a good trip.
Very nice indeed, yes. It's very good.
My last few moments by Lake Malawi, and I was struck by a profound and far-reaching thought. I'd left my suitcase on board the bloody ship.
I'm John Hemingway. Be sure to join us next time on Travels.
Funding for Travels was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the financial support of viewers like you.
This episode of Travels is available on VHS video cassette for $19.95. Call 1-800-336-1917 or write to the address on your screen. Please specify program title or subject matter.
This is PBS.